Time now to join Frank O'Callaghan for the next instalment of the series Dundalk's Radio and Television People. Part 11. Frank Byrne remembers joining Pat Reynolds Electronics in 1971 and the assembly of Joy transistor radios, which were taken in batches of 5,000 units at a time from Asia. Reynolds Electronics started in Bachelor's Walk before moving to Stapleton Drive, Jocelyn Street, Pearse Park, and finally relocated to an IDA factory in the Finnabar Industrial Estate. Damien Halpenny recalls the introduction of the Nordmende 26-inch colour television sets, which were shipped from Bremen, Germany, and the sound and vision tuning modifications which needed to be made so the sets would receive signals from RTE, BBC and UTV.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the programme here. And I have to say I'm delighted tonight to be able to invite and welcome Mr. Frank Byrne and Mr. Damien Halpin, former employees of Pat Reynolds Electronics. You're very welcome, gentlemen, and I'm extremely looking forward to what I'm going to hear tonight. It's probably going to blow my mind on the technological side of things, but we'll take it from there.
We'll do our best.
Now, as we already know, we have a lot of information about Pat Reynolds, the person himself. And so where I'd like to start here is the various factories or locations for manufacturing that he had in Dundalk. And as far as I can establish from listening to you talking, the first place was Bachelor's Walk. Is that right?
True. Yes.
And what, can you explain maybe where it was in Bachelor's Walk for the listeners?
Yeah.
What actually happened there?
Sure. I joined Reynolds Electronics in 1971, and that was in Bachelor's Walk. It was close to the top of Clonbrassil Street, 3-storey building, a furniture shop for the first 2 floors. The third floor was where Reynolds were. Started off making small transistor radios, known as Joy radios. I don't know if anyone remember them or not, but JOY. He took in kits of parts, 5,000 at a time.
From where?
From Singapore. It would come in boxes and crates. All the discrete components had to be assembled, soldered in. They were not in kit form. It was a total manufacturing process. I realigned them and so forth. So I was involved in manufacturing and setting up manufacturing. When I joined, I think there was about 5-6 people working in it. And we were manufacturing. We tried to get up to about 100 radios a day. Fairly fast stuff being made with skillful, with people soldering.
What
and
the cost of that to purchase be as a matter of interest?
the radio sold for £5 retail. That it's sold in electrical shops. McCann's in Dundalk. John McCann was a big supplier. McCann and O'Neill.
And this marketplace, was it throughout Ireland?
Throughout Ireland, domestic Ireland, yes. Sold through, initially the big breakthrough was through Buck Brothers, who are a big wholesaling company in Dublin. So they took them in fair quantity and sold them on to the smaller retailers.
Excellent.
Yes.
That was good business back in the day, wasn't it?
It was interesting to get involved in at that stage, yes.
Am I right in thinking then, Frank, that they moved up to Stapleton Place, where the current Tesco place is?
Yes, Stapleton Place, yes. At that time it was Phil Monaghan. People might not remember Phil Monaghan. Yeah. Dublin Road Motors, were moving their premises. So we went into Stapleton Place. Where we were in Bachelor's Walk, it was too small for us. We had to take equipment up 2 flights of stairs. So we were on the ground floor in Stapleton Place, a big property. I think it was about 5,000 square feet or more, maybe even. So we were there for...
Am I right in thinking there was a company up there called Building and Engineering?
Yes.
That Phil Monaghan was involved in as well.
That's true, yes. Yes, they were there as well. Yeah, they were...
And tell me what happened up in that Stapleton Place location.
Stapleton Place seen Reynolds development in more or less their second stage or third stage of manufacturing. Apart from manufacturing transistor Joy radios, they got involved in manufacturing audio equipment, designing and manufacturing audio equipment. And then introduced Damien at this stage, because
Is this where you came in,
Damien came involved.
Yes, I think they knew that we were getting the Nordmende agency. That was part of the reason for moving up there as well. And it like between getting it and the parts actually being shipped, there was quite a delay, a few months to get everything organised. So I suppose before they even arrived, we were getting set up for reassembling these receivers,
Nordmende.
Yeah.
And can you tell me about the process there?
Well, basically, when they came in, we had a very sort of rudimentary way of putting a cabinet on a stand, which was easy to drop the heaviest part, the CRT. At that stage, was a big glass bulb, if you like. And then from that, you put in the various the main chassis, which was the power supply, etc., and then the signal part of it. Now, there was still changes to be made to it at that stage because, first of all, there was the differ in the sound spacings between sound and vision. That was one change. But also, there was a few anomalies in Ireland, like every house had two aerials in Ireland. They had a UHF, they had the UHF one, and they had a VHF for RTE. So as the sets arrived, they only had one socket. So that was another thing.
As the Normandy set arrived.
The Normandy had just a single socket, so we had to separate out the UHF and the VHF tuner.
You had to localise it.
And we had to put in circuitry there to allow the use of two sockets. Fairly rudimentary stuff. There was just a coil or two that had to be added to prevent hum bars appearing on the screen, a few things like that. And then the early sets, there was probably more work with them because the alignment was done with coils at that stage. But within I suppose a matter of 3 or 4 years, they started using what they call SAW filters, surface acoustic filters. So you didn't have to adjust those, you just changed them.
All right.
In other
Can
words...
I just stop you there for a minute and ask you to go back a step or two, at least
Right.
to satisfy my mind. In what state was the Normandy television when it came into Ireland? Was it assembled? Was it in component parts?
Oh, it was in module parts. I think it'd be wrong to call them the components were assembled.
Of the
yes,
thing.
so
Yeah.
you are basically putting modules together. But you must remember that to disassemble it, for everyone's satisfaction, they had to take things like the scan coils off. Now, the early televisions, the alignment of the three guns was called convergence, and there was a lot of readjustment. No matter how you did it, even though you put the same coil that was on it originally, when you put that back, you had the convergence all had to be set up. So, just to go back to, you assembled it first. You did the modifications for the sound, for the aerial inputs, and you did all the setup like grayscale tracking. That's to make sure that it stays the right colour through all the different light settings. Various, and then convergence. And then, of course, you put them on test, and they ran usually for a day or two, and then they were ready to box up.
Ready for sale at that stage?
They were, yeah.
Yeah, and many people had you in the factory at that point in time.
Well, you see, it was divided between the radio assembly and the TV assembly. So the TV assembly, there wouldn't have been all that many in it, maybe 4 or 5, I suppose. Would that be right, Frank?
Yeah, around that. I mean,
Yes, yeah.
How many TVs per day or whatever?
Well, that depended totally on the last shipment. You know, like they came in containers, so there would be a time when you'd be really clocking through them, and then some of the people that worked on the TV would go back and work on other. Yeah.
And just moving over to the radio for a moment, how many of those would you manufacture in the day?
Well, here Frank is...
Yeah. Well, we moved on from the little Joy radio, which was a little, very small, much like the size of a cigarette packet, in all honesty, quite a small radio. Moved from that, Reynolds started to design their own products. They designed an audio player.
And don't forget, there was another radio as well, which was made in the first establishment, and that was the Playmate. And the Playmate was a leatherette cabinet on it. And believe it or not, one of the modifications we did, and this was one that Eugene McCabe, I think, did the original design on, and that was to put long wave on it. Now, you're probably looking and saying, why would anyone? But long wave was quite an important band at that time. So we took the single...
What did having long wave bring to the party?
Well, it meant...
BBC Radio 2 transmitted on long wave.
See, if you
mentioned Luxembourg or something.
No, Luxembourg was on medium wave.
Yeah.
We were okay on that one, yes.
But technically, you see, the reason they used it for... It was capable of bending the signal round the world. The signal from long wave went up, hit the ionosphere, came back down, back up, and in other words, it could track its way round. It could bend the signal round the world. And that's why the sun never shone on. What was it? The sun never set on the British Empire. Well, that was their means of communication. Now, as it turned out, then it was phased out for radio because it was much more important for submarine and for other things. So it's not used for radio anymore. You know what I mean?
How advanced the whole system was back in that time.
Yeah, but they had a hugely powerful, in Britain they had hugely powerful long wave station, you know what I mean? And that allowed them to communicate, the BBC World Service. You know what I mean?
So moving on just for a bit from the location Stapleton Place, am I right in thinking they moved up to Jocelyn Street somewhere? What was
Stapleton Place moved back to R.F. Martin's old premises opposite the Home Bakery, the top of Jocelyn Street. Yeah. Yes.
What was the purpose of the move? Was it because
it
was being developed up here?
The shopping centre was being developed. Yes, yes.
So was there any change in production when they moved down to Jocelyn Street?
No, the same range of products were made, even increased, even though our space was. There wasn't more, but it was again spread over 3 floors.
Yeah,
3 floors.
The small stuff, the radio production was done
upstairs,
and the TVs had to be done
at floor level
on the lower.
Yeah,
you know.
that's right. We were there for a while. It was a matter of finding a place, and
that must have been about 1976.
Possibly, yes, probably, mid 70s.
Yeah.
All the time on the lookout for another place because it wasn't suitable. Jocelyn Street wasn't suitable for the product that we were making, TVs and radios.
Yeah, and I suppose back in that period of time, there wasn't that much variation or location. There wasn't many places you could use.
No premises.
Nothing at all.
Very, very few premises.
Where did you go after that, Frank?
From Jocelyn Street, moved up to Mulholland Avenue.
Halliday's old factory.
Halliday's old factory, exactly. Halliday's old factory, yes.
For a while, or was that after for the sorting office? No, that was after we left.
The post office are in at the moment.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
That's the location.
Yes, that's
the location. Well, that must have been like a brand new factory for you.
That was fantastic. Yeah. That was all
modern.
on floor level, big area. We could set up proper production lines. Got new flow solder machines because we started manufacturing a lot more products at that point in time.
How many people had you at that stage?
Ish. A figure comes to mind, 30, 40.
The TV volume has gone right high at that stage. We had things like ramp loader. We had easy ways of getting the products on and off the. Yeah.
Just tell me something about the type of person you employed, the technology, or how did you get your employees? Were they qualified? Were they ordinary chaps off the street? What was it?
Initially, they were trained by FOSS, Anco as it was in the early days. They had got some soldering skills and we took them from there. This is the very early stages when we'd only 4 or 5 people working. And after that, then Damien came on as an engineer. He joined from design point of view because he was involved in the TV and so forth. And I progressed on to still looking after manufacturing. We manufactured a lot.
So Frank, when you got up to the place Hallidays as it was,
yeah.
Were you bringing in qualified people, or were you training your own staff?
We were still. Sorry, Damien.
The regional had started in '71. That made a huge difference. Don't forget, before that, it was very hard to get any type of technical training. The best you could do was to go down, do the evening classes down in Church Street. And down there, we did the City and Guilds Telecommunications. I think Frank did it as well.
What you're saying there, Damien, is that the arrival of the RTC, is that what it was called at the time?
Huge
difference.
Huge difference. In a few years, when the people started coming off that, like, he had people that...
How well trained were they good?
Dundalk were turning out excellent electronic people. Don't forget, Dundalk was the first to offer the diploma. It was a 2+1. So you did the certificate. If you got a credit in that, then it allowed you to go on to the diploma. And to be fair, and I'd say Eugene McCabe again was at the back of it, a lot of the people like myself, they allowed us to go back in and do the diploma, the full-time diploma, part-time. In other words, And this applied to a lot of the lads that worked in the lack of echo. There was a lot of people that did quite sophisticated technical work, but they didn't have any papers. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, and the system allowed them to go back in and get their qualifications.
Yeah, because where before that, Bolton Street or Kevin Street was really the only place, and that was not accessible for most people. And even the course they ran in Kevin Street, for instance, that was like a course based on Marconi. It was mainly aimed at radio officers, if you wanted to be a radio officer. It wasn't exactly, but you would learn enough on it. Yeah. Once you learned, at the beginning, you see, we're sort of missing a bit in as much as in 72, everything was valves. And suddenly, with the arrival of colour TV and that, it was virtually impossible to make it without semiconductors. It was just too complex. You know what I mean? There'd be just too many valves. So the semiconductors made a huge difference, but the training for that had to follow, and that's where the RTC came in.
Just stepping aside here with my question, did the arrival of the RTC in Dundalk actually help take new industry into the town?
Absolutely.
An example, like for instance?
Accuray would be one that we could talk about. They employed a lot of, you probably are familiar with that yourself, Frank, from that point of view. But prior to that, we were, as Damien said, we were going to night classes. We were all going to try and get involved, get in night classes and get some qualification in city and guilds. But then once the RTC came on board, we Reynolds employed technicians then with either certificate or diploma, and then specialised them in the aspects of maybe colour, TV repairs.
RTC rather, was a tremendous boost to the town.
Oh, very much so. Very much. Suited everyone. Lots of...
But you should remember that students came from Carlow and other RTCs to do their diploma in Dundalk. You know what I mean?
Industry here.
Yes. And it was a very high standard because, in fact, they had a delegation from the States later on, and they looked at what they were doing in Dundalk, and they reckoned that it was equivalent or maybe better than some of the degree courses in the US. So
it's nice on a programme like this on Dundalk FM to be able to give that degree of credit to the RTC, you know, because they obviously did a big job. And I'm not sure how many people in the town would actually realise the value that they brought into our town at that point in time. Can I ask you then about moving on to, am I right, the IDA factory on the bypass?
Yes, that was a new purpose-built factory, and Reynolds were offered the first option on it. At this stage, Reynolds were involved very much apart from being quite a fairly big company with Nordmende TVs. They also had brought on some other agencies like Samsung. They brought on Samsung computers.
This was in the early 1980s, wasn't it?
Early 1980s.
Yeah.
Samsung, they sealed up. Yes.
I remember what happened with Samsung was they had a few salesmen on the road, and the salesmen were coming back saying, there's a market out there for a small portable, I say portable, like low voltage if someone's in it. And we're saying, like, there's a market there. So we were looking at this book, Asian Sources, and we're saying, now Samsung would have been virtually unheard of at this stage. And we said, well, there's one there. And Pat said, sure, look, we'll take a sample or two of that in. And that was the first, they would have been the first Samsung in Ireland.
Where did Samsung, just for the listeners, where did they come from?
Well, they came from the Far East, where I suppose... the
country of
China,
origin.
Korea, yeah.
But, so am I reading this correctly? What happened there was somebody here saw that opportunity, brought some samples in, and then decided to try and manufacture that.
No, we just imported them at the moment. They took that in, and then, of course, Samsung had other models, and we got the agency.
Yeah, you were working in conjunction with Samsung.
Yeah.
And how successful was that venture?
Very good, because their cost, you know, I still remember Pat sitting across the table from the engineer that came over, and I thought he was very honest. You know, he said, Pat looked at him and he said, are these TVs reliable, you know? And your man thought for a while and he said, reliable, and he waved like that, like so, but price, very good. You know?
Yeah. So it was reliability plus cheap.
Well, as a total, they were reliable enough. Yeah, of course they were.
The first little small 14-inch black and white TVs. In actual fact, 3 guys, I don't know if you remember this or not, 3 guys came from Samsung. I think it was Korea. Now it comes back to me. I think it was Korea was their source. But they came on their own, flew themselves in, didn't want to be collected at the airport, made their way down on the train. I remember we collected them at Dundalk station, 3 of their engineers, to set up the process so that we would be familiar with their repair system and so forth.
Well, I suppose that brings me to the question of at this point in time in the mid-1980s, what was the manufacturing process like? How sophisticated was it? How was the thing put together?
Oh yeah, well, we had a new flow. You're probably a bit familiar yourself with flow soldering machines, Frank. Have you come across them? You have. Well, we purchased a new flow soldering machine where the operators, as we would call them, the workers, mainly female, would put the components into the printed circuit board, a bare printed circuit board. They would populate it by putting them in. Fairly sophisticated work as well. Components had to be configured the right way and in the right position and so forth like that. So yeah, we were full blown into manufacturing at that point in time. And not on television, but in audio equipment. And then, I don't know if we're ready to lead on to the telephone answering machine, maybe.
Well, yeah. You have to remember, like, at that stage, all the components in these boards were what we call axial. They had a pair of leads on them. Whereas now, and for a long time, they're not. They're vapor. They're if you like, stuck onto the board, and then that's heated, and the components connect in that way. You know what I mean?
In this programme, Frank Byrne and Damien Halpenny looked back at the history of Reynolds Electronics from the introduction of transistor radios, the manufacturing and modifications of radios and televisions, and the research and development facilities at the Finnabar Industrial Estate. The second part of the conversation about Reynolds Electronics with Damien and Frank continues in part 12. The series, Dundalk's Radio and Television People, was researched and presented by Frank O'Callaghan and recorded and edited by Alan Byrne.